Hi friends, as an English language teacher, I've met a lot of students whose English is really good, but they still can't get a good score on IELTS writing. This is because in order to get a band 7 or above on IELTS writing, you need to know exactly what the examiners are looking for in your answers. And I can't express how important that is if you want to get a band 7 or above. So in this video, I'm going to give you a bunch of tips to help you score really high on IELTS Writing Task 1 by writing an answer that the examiners want to see. And all of these tips come from the scoring criteria for IELTS Writing Task 1, this scoring criteria here. Let's zoom into the higher bands because that's what we want to achieve. And if you look closely, you can see that there are 4 main categories you're being scored on. So now I'm going to go through each of these categories one by one, and I'll show you some tips in order to score high for each category. Each category is equally important. The first category was task achievement. Task achievement basically refers to the quality of your answer. For writing task 1, we can think of it as, were you able to identify all the main features in your graph, diagram or map, and then write about them in a clear and organized way. Let's take a look at what the criteria says exactly, and then I'll show you some tips for this category. Let's take a look at what you need to do on task achievement to score a band 7. You need to clearly present and highlight the key features. If you do not do this, you will get a band 4. Band 4 states that the student does not cover all the key features. But what does this actually mean? How are you able to present the main features in your answer? Well, first thing you need to do is identify what the graph or map is actually about. And then, importantly and more difficultly, you need to find the most significant information. Basically, the most interesting and important information in the graph, and then write about that clearly. Of course, that's not an easy thing to do, especially if you're not familiar with graphs, which to be honest, most people are not. But it is important to do if you want to get a good score on this IELTS writing task. So let me show you how you can do that here now. So let's say this is our graph. The first question you need to ask yourself is, what is the graph showing? We have a couple key things to focus on. Firstly, the title, and then the 2 axes. Firstly, the title. In this example, it is oil production capacity. And then we have the 2 axes. They are millions of barrels per day and countries by decade. So those are the key features of this graph. Now you need to do something a bit more difficult, which is to identify the most significant or important information in this graph. You can do this by looking at overall trends in the graph, or you can do it by looking at the main differences between the items in the graph. Overall trends refers to the overall theme of the graph, and the main differences is where you can compare and contrast the different items in the graph. Let's go back to this example and try to identify the trends and important information. So what is the main trend here? Well, I think the main trend is an upward trend of oil production. In almost every country in this graph, the oil production increased, so we can say there's an upward trend. And what about the most significant or interesting information? Well, we might want to take a look at these 2 countries here and discuss contrast. Qatar on the left has showed almost no increase, whereas Saudi Arabia, the oil production has increased significantly. It's essential to write about all of those features, what the graph is about, what is the trend, and what is the significant information in the chart. But that's not all. Now you need to organize your answer in a special way. IELTS examiners are looking for all of these key features, but they also like them to be written in an organized manner, which it does say in the criteria if we look here. So again, look at band 7. Point number 1 presents a clear overview of the main trends, differences, or stages. So you need to organize your answer in a logical way. And this is a sample structure I suggest. You have an introduction, an overview, detailed paragraph 1, and detailed paragraph 2. You do not need a conclusion for IELTS Writing Task 1. And here's a sample answer using that structure. You can pause this video to read if you want. So that's task relevance. Now let's take a look at cohesion and coherence, which is all about the structure and flow of your answer. The criteria has lots of information, but here is the most important part. To get a band 7, you need to logically organize your ideas and use cohesive devices. Basically, the flow of your answer. But what does this actually mean? Well, you need to organize your answer logically, usually from general to specific, and then you need to use link-in words to link your sentences and ideas together. That's really important. If you want to get a good score, you need to do those two things well. Earlier, we talked about a structure. Now let's look at that structure in more detail, and I'll show you all the key points of it. So this is the sample answer I showed you earlier. Let's analyze it together now, looking for the key points based on cohesion and coherence. So paragraph 1, here you need to paraphrase the question and state what the graph is all about. And do this in just one sentence. You don't need to go into much detail. Just write one sentence about what the graph is showing generally. Paragraph 2, you provide a general overview of the trends in the graph. No numbers are needed here, and 1 or 2 sentences is usually enough. Paragraph 3 and 4 are all about the details. Here you go into specific information. So you go into detail about all the main features. Discuss numbers or percentages, and I suggest you do this in 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph can be the most important information, and the second paragraph can be the less important information. And you can use link-in words like in contrast or despite throughout your answer. These link-in words are also known as cohesive devices, and this is in the IELTS criteria that I showed you earlier. So use a few of these words in your answer. Okay, now let's move on to the next section, which is lexical resource, basically vocabulary, and this is what the criteria has to say about this category. You need to use a wide range of vocabulary accurately. IELTS examiners don't like it if you repeat the same words over and over again. You need to use a range of synonyms if possible to get a good score, a band 7 or above. And I think this is quite easy for you to do if you learn the words well. So let me show you some examples now. So let's take a look at this example. I have used the word increase 5 times. You don't want to do that. You want to use some synonyms for this word. For example, you might use the word increase once and then change to surged or climb, rise or peak. These are all synonyms for the word increase. So as you can see from this example, it is really important not to use the same word over and over again. It is very obvious for the IELTS examiner, and they will mark you down for doing that. If you want to learn a bunch of synonyms for different phrases for describing a graph, I made a whole video on that as well. There is a link below in the description. Study that and then write your answers in the comments and I'll check them for you. And lastly, we have grammatical range and accuracy. To get a band 7 or above, you need to produce frequent error-free sentences and use a variety of complex structures. Particularly on the IELTS exam, you need to use complex structures. On IELTS Writing Task 1, you should aim to get 2 or 3 of these structures in your answer. They're not easy to use, but also not that difficult if you learn how to do them well. So I'll show you how to use them. First, we'll take a look at how I use them in my sample answer, and then I'll teach you how to use these complex structures easily. So in my sample answer, I used 2 complex structures, one for each paragraph. The first one was, despite a slight increase in 2000, production in Qatar remained relatively steady at less than 1 million barrels per day. And in the second paragraph, the estimated figure for Iran in 1990 was 3 million barrels per day, compared with around 2 million barrels in the other 3 countries. Simply put, a complex structure links 2 ideas together, normally with a subordinating conjunction. A word like despite, even though, however. All of these grammar words I'm sure you know really well already. But even though you do know how to do this well, I'm sure, let's still practice together now. So here are some subordinating conjunctions, and these are our 2 ideas. Idea number 1. There was a slight increase of oil production in Qatar in 2000. Idea 2. Production of oil remained steady at 1 million barrels per day. Now, it would be good to link these 2 ideas together, and we can using some of these subordinating conjunctions. Notice that these 2 sentences show contrast. A slight increase and remained steady. That is a contrast. So which of these subordinating conjunctions show contrast? Well, it's these ones here. Despite, even though, whereas, or while. We can take one of these subordinating conjunctions and link these two ideas together. For example, despite a slight increase in 2000, oil production in Qatar remained steady at less than 1 million barrels per day. So this lesson mostly covered graphs, but you also need to learn how to describe a map. Maps come up quite a lot on the IELTS Writing Task 1, and this video here will help you with maps. You'll learn a structure and lots of vocabulary for describing maps really well and getting your band 7 or above. I recommend you watch this video and I'll see you there. Bye.